as well, Mr. Kiesling. I see you there on the platform as well. Thank you, sir. Good morning, Dr. Murphy.
Good morning. How are you doing, Brandon?
I'm doing well. Ranking Member Dr. Murphy. Good to see you, sir. Your audio and visual check-in had already been completed, but always good to get refamiliarized with the unmute and mute process, sir.
All right. Awesome. Thank you.
Good to go, Dr. Murphy.
Did you have a good break when the clowns were out of the circus?
Sir, there hasn't been much of a break. Congress on both sides of the Capitol has been moving consistently, sir. So,
as it should, as we should. We're here to
absolutely.
do the people's business, right?
Absolutely, Dr. Murphy.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chicano. I can see you, sir.
Good morning, sir. Can you hear me?
I can. Good to see you, Mr. Chicano, and of course, welcome to this morning's soon-to-start HUE subcommittee hearing. Good morning, Mr. Buchanan.
Good morning. How you doing?
I'm doing well, sir. Good to see you, and as well, welcome to this morning's HUE subcommittee hearing, Mr. Buchanan. Both you and Mr. Chicano's audio-visual check-ins are complete and are good to go, sir.
Thank you.
So tomorrow I'll make the full binder for Rosetta.
Morning, testing my sound.
Good morning, Ms. Bonamici. Yes, your audio and visual check-in is complete.
Thank you, Banyan.
I can see you and hear you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chairwoman Wilson.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good to see you, Madam Chair. And of course, welcome to today's HUE subcommittee hearing. The ranking member, Dr. Murphy, and several of his other subcommittee members are available on the platform, as well as our complete and esteemed panel of experts. Chairwoman Wilson.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to your riveting testimony. This is a very important hearing. It's the last in a series, and we're just so excited about this bipartisan effort. It's not a lot of bipartisanship in Congress these days, but we're very fortunate on the Committee on Education and Labor. And we appreciate having the opportunity to hear from you today. Mr. Murphy, and Ms. Fox, good morning. I see all of our esteemed members lining up. We're just leaving a caucus meeting, so there might be a little delay in members joining. But as soon as we get a quorum, we're going to begin.
This meeting is being recorded.
Good morning. We are ready to begin. I will count down from 5 and then we will start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The Subcommittee on Education and Workforce Investment will come to order. Welcome, everyone. I note that a quorum is present. The subcommittee is meeting today to hear testimony on workforce innovation and Opportunity Act reauthorization, examining successful methods of employment for justice-involved individuals.
Go ahead.
Entirely remote hearing. All microphones will be kept muted as a general rule to avoid unnecessary background noise. Members and witnesses will be responsible for unmuting themselves when they are recognized to speak or when they wish to seek recognition. I ask that members please identify themselves before they speak. Members should keep their cameras on while in the proceedings. Members shall be considered present in the proceedings when they are visible on camera, and they shall be considered not present when they are not visible on camera. The only exception to this, if they are experiencing technical difficulty, and inform committee staff of such difficulty. If any member experiences technical difficulties during the hearing, you should stay connected on the platform. Make sure you are muted and use your phone to immediately call the committee. The committee's IT director, whose number was provided in advance. Should the chair experience technical difficulty or need to step away to vote on the floor, Mr. Pecan or another majority member is hereby authorized to assume the gavel in the chair's absence. This is an entirely remote hearing, and as such, the committee's hearing room is officially closed. Members who choose to sit with their individual devices in the hearing room must wear headphones to avoid feedback, echoes, and distortion resulting from more than one person on the software platform sitting in the same room. Members are also expected to adhere to social distancing and safe health care guidelines, including the use of masks, hand sanitizer, and wiping down their areas before and after their presence in the hearing room. In order to ensure that the committee's 5-minute rule is adhered to, staff will be keeping track of time using the committee's field timer. The field timer will appear in its own thumbnail picture and will not be named. There will be no 1-minute remaining warning. The field timer will show a blinking light when time is up. Members and witnesses are asked to wrap up promptly when their time has expired. When a roll call is not necessary to establish a quorum in official proceedings, conducted remotely or with remote participation, the committee has made it a practice whenever there is an official proceeding with remote participation for the clerk to call the roll to help make clear who is present at the start of the proceeding. Members should say their names before announcing they are present. This helps the clerk and also helps those watching the platform and the live stream who may experience a few seconds delay. At this time, I ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Chairwoman Wilson,
Chairperson Wilson is present.
Mr. Takano,
Mark Takano is present.
Ms. Jayapal, Ms. Omar, Ms. Ledger Fernandez, Mr. Jones,
Jones is present.
Ms. Manning, Mr. Bowman,
Mr. Bowman is present.
Mr. Pocan,
Mr. Pocan is present.
Mr. Castro, Ms. Cheryl, Mr. Espaillat, Mr. Grijalva, Mr. Courtney, Ms. Bonamici, Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Dr. Murphy,
Dr. Murphy is present.
Mr. Grothman, Ms. Stefanik, Mr. Banks, Mr. Comer,
Here. Comer's here.
Mr. Fulcher,
Vulture's here.
Mrs. Miller-Meeks, Mr. Good, Mrs. McLean, Mrs. Harshbarger,
Harshbarger's present.
Mrs. Sparks, Ms. Letlow, Ranking Member Fox.
Fox is here.
Chairwoman Wilson, this concludes the roll call.
How am I recorded? This is Representative Jayapal.
Chairwoman Wilson, Mrs. Jayapal is not recorded.
Jayapal is present.
How am I recorded? This is Chairman Scott.
Chairman Scott is not recorded.
Chairman Scott's present.
Thank you. Chairwoman Wilson, this concludes the roll call.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Pursuant to Committee Rule 8C, opening statements are limited to the chair and the ranking member. This allows us to hear from our witnesses sooner and provides all members with adequate time to ask questions. I recognize myself now for the purpose of making an opening statement. Today, we meet with our third bipartisan hearing on reauthorizing the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA. This hearing will address key priorities to help people impacted by the criminal justice system re-enter their communities and obtain rewarding careers. Each year, roughly 640,000 people are released from our nation's state and federal prisons. What happens after their return determines whether or not these justice-involved individuals successfully re-enter society. Unfortunately, far too many are unable to take a critical step in their transition, finding and keeping a good paying job. According to one study, just over half of those released from prison reported any earnings within the first year after their release. The stigma surrounding the employment of justice-impacted individuals is one of the forces limiting their opportunities. Making matters worse, people who have been incarcerated often must take additional steps to gain the education, skills, or work experience the employers are seeking. And they face an array of additional challenges, from mental health needs to difficulty obtaining housing or transportation. These barriers have a significant impact on justice-impacted people. Without access to high-quality jobs, they are more likely to be rearrested and could fall into an endless cycle of re-incarceration. High recidivism doesn't just hurt these individuals, it also hurts our nation as a whole. Research indicates that 83% of people released from prison are rearrested within 9 years. This is a contributing factor to the nation's high rate of incarceration, along with mandatory minimum sentences, long sentences for nonviolent crimes, and a lack of investment in prison programs and reentry services. Today, the United States continues to have the highest incarceration rate in the world, with more than 2 million people behind bars in 2019. According to the Bureau of Institute of Justice, this level of incarceration costs our country as much as $80 billion every year. Accounting for costs to our communities and the next generation. By comparison, funding for Title I of WIOA stands at about $3.7 billion annually. If we really want to break the cycle of costly incarceration, we need to reject dehumanizing policies in favor of investing in opportunities for these individuals to succeed. To help combat recidivism, the Department of Labor currently supports the Reentry Employment Opportunities Program, or REO. This program provides community groups, faith-based organizations, and state and local agencies with grants to offer reentry employment services, including skills, training, and mentoring. These services reach thousands of people each year. Yet, we know we all could not do much more for justice-impacted individuals. In fact, WIOA has no provisions that specifically authorize reentry programs. As we reauthorize WIOA, we can make smart investments and promising approaches that reduce recidivism and expand employment opportunities for justice-impacted people. For example, we can ensure that reentry programs offer the full range of services that are needed to help justice-impacted people avoid rearrest. Behavioral health treatment, when paired with employment services, including subsidized employment, is an effective strategy to reduce recidivism. Mentorship, career navigation, and job coaching are also critical to helping individuals build professional relationships and look for jobs in demand industries. Finally, we must capitalize on the rising interest in hiring justice-impacted workers among employers. That includes helping people not only find jobs, but also build toward lasting careers. Bolstering subsidized employment and vocational training can help justice-impacted individuals earn short-term income in initial employment experiences. It also can help employers overcome harmful misrepresentations and misperceptions about justice-impacted workers. Subsidized employment can be the first step toward helping individuals move on to more rewarding careers. Empowering justice-involved individuals to find high-quality careers should be a bipartisan issue. It's not only the right thing to do, it's all the smart thing to do. Businesses benefit when there is a robust, skilled workforce ready to compete for jobs. With so many justice-impacted individuals looking to re-enter the labor force every year, we can make progress toward addressing the worker shortage that so many employers are concerned about. Today, with the help of our witnesses, we will discuss how codifying re-entry employment opportunities in reauthorization would help improve the lives of people across the nation and reduce prison populations. We spend so much money on incarcerating hundreds of thousands of Americans each year. It's time that we invest in the training and support services to help individuals find sustainable, high-quality careers that will reduce recidivism and strengthen our communities. Thank you again to our witnesses for being here with us. I now recognize the distinguished ranking member for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairwoman Wilson. It's nice to see everybody's full face, and we look forward to everybody coming back in person and being able to be in all the committee rooms together. But thank you for convening this bipartisan hearing. I'd like to welcome also the witnesses who are coming to this committee. I look forward to working with all of you to help improve our country's workforce development system. America is known as the land of opportunity for a reason. Throughout our nation's history, we have shown a unique ability to accomplish what we set out to do. Part of this success is that we are blessed with an industrious citizenry, and part of this success is attributable to our faith in humanity's ability to overcome the odds. We are a nation and a people of second chances. A prison sentence is not supposed to result in a permanent exclusion from the world. In fact, all corners of society have an interest in giving incarcerated men and women opportunities to equip themselves with the skills that they need to succeed outside of prison. Steady work performed with care and pride honors the dignity of an individual and contributes to human flourishing. Re-entry into the workforce is a key element towards realizing that personal fulfillment. Steady work federal criminal justice policy has somewhat of a checkered past. We must admit that. Both Republicans and Democrats are working together now to solve these difficult problems. In 2018, 9 months before I joined the House of Representatives, President Trump signed into law the First Step Act. We are hopeful that this new legislation will maintain public safety and reduce recidivism rates. And in December of 2020, Congress authorized Pell Grants for incarcerated students and will provide thousands of people access to a college education. These may seem like insignificant changes, but they mean the world to those who benefit from them. I see no reason why reauthorization cannot play a small role in building upon this progress. The Reentry Employment Opportunities Program, currently funded through WIOA, supports youth and adults previously involved in the criminal justice system. RIO grantees can assist these populations in a variety of ways, including with mentoring, housing, case management, employment, and violent prevention services. We have seen what works over the last 15 years, and I look forward to hearing from the witnesses how Congress can improve this funding stream. Current law allows workforce development boards to use up to 10% of their adult and dislocated worker program funding to help unemployed or inconsistently employed individuals relocate rewarding, transitioning jobs through subsidized employment. Some workforce boards have used this flexibility to serve re-entry populations. It is worth exploring what has worked for local communities. Congress can compile and publicize their best practices to other workforce boards that may be interested in expanding their services to incarcerated individuals. Arrogance prompts us to believe that the federal government alone can support formerly incarcerated individuals. There are many local service providers, employers, community-based organizations that all play an indispensable part in transforming the lives of ex-offenders, and their challenges cannot be solved just with truckloads of money. We must leverage the experience of these too often overlooked partners during reauthorization. A one-size-fits-all mandates from Congress are precisely the wrong approach. Our workforce development system should be capable of listening and adapting to the needs of the local labor market, employers, and those seeking opportunity. This reauthorization of WIOA must further encourage local communities to innovate when their existing operations fall short. Nobody should feel threatened for trying new evidence-based ideas, and the pace of technology change demands a nimble approach to career preparation. Ensuring people have the necessary skills to find good jobs is key to sustaining a thriving middle class. As the pandemic recedes from our lives, overcoming the economic fallout is at the top of everyone's minds. Our workforce development system must do a better job of helping all individuals looking to improve their skills, especially those coming out of the penal system. I am hopeful that bipartisan reauthorization can provide justice-involved individuals the workforce opportunities that they deserve. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. And without objection, all other members who wish to insert written statements into the record may do so by submitting them to the committee clerk electronically in Microsoft Word format by 5:00 p.m. on June 29, 2021. I will now introduce the witnesses. Tracy Scott is the Vice President of Workforce Development for the National Urban League, where she oversees a variety of programs targeting different industries and populations, including justice-involved individuals. Welcome, Tracy Scott. George Kiesling is the founder and president of Recycle Force, an electronics recycling social enterprise in Indianapolis that employs and provides other support to justice-involved individuals. Welcome. Pamela Lattimore is the Senior Director of Research Development in the Division for Applied Justice Research at RTI International, where she leads research focused on understanding crime and related problems. Ms. Lattimore is an internationally recognized expert on reentry, and her prior experience includes serving as Director of the Criminal Justice and Criminal Behavior Division of the National Institute of Justice. Wendy Safstrom is the Executive Director of the Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM Foundation, the nonprofit affiliate of SHRM. We appreciate all of you for coming today. Thank you so much. We look forward to your amazing testimony, and we look forward to hearing all of your experiences and sharing with us. Let me remind the witnesses that we have read your written statements, and they will appear in full in the hearing record. Pursuant to Committee Rule 8D and committee practice, each of you is asked to limit your oral presentation to a 5-minute summary of your written statement. Before you begin your testimony, please remember to before you begin, remember to unmute your microphone. During your testimony, staff will be keeping track of time, and a light will blink when time is up. Please be attentive to the time. Wrap up when your time is over and re-mute your microphone. If any of you experience technical difficulties during your testimony or later in the hearing, you should stay connected on the platform. Make sure you are muted and use your phone to immediately call the committee's IT director, whose number was provided to you in advance. We will let all of the witnesses make their presentations before we move to member questions. When answering a question, please remember to unmute your microphone. The witnesses are aware of their responsibility to provide accurate information to the subcommittee, and therefore we will proceed with their testimony. I will first recognize Mr. Scott. Welcome, Mr. Scott. Miss Scott. Miss Scott, Miss Scott.
Thank you very much. Chair Wilson, Chair Scott, Ranking Member Murphy, Ranking Member Fox, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for this opportunity to testify. My name is Tracy Scott. I am the National Urban League's Vice President of Workforce Development. And on behalf of Mark Morial, our President and CEO, I bring you greetings. The National Urban League is a historic civil rights community-based organization with a mission grounded in the belief that a job with a living wage and good benefits is the key to economic power. We have served the formerly incarcerated for over 50 years, even before grant money was targeted for this purpose. The National Urban League won its first Department of Labor RIO grant in 2005 and has since managed 8 federal grants for reentry, serving both youth and adults. Among our clients, 86% earned a credential or certificate, 65 reported finding employment. The program's recidivism rate is lower than 5%, well under the Department of Labor's 22% threshold. The strength of the Department of Labor's RIO program is the opportunity for national and regional intermediaries to compete for a separate pot of money within the overall program. National intermediaries play a valuable role implementing federal initiatives, providing technical assistance, and ensuring consistency, scale, and accountability. We strongly recommend maintaining this component in the WIOA statute. We submit for the committee's consideration the following changes to strengthen the Department of Labor's RIO program, informed by our experience. The first, increase the amount of federal reentry funding to meet the demand of services. Early release policies, as well as need for reskilling given COVID-19's economic impact, have increased demand for workforce development services, particularly in communities of color. Unfortunately, WIOA funding has not kept pace. Given the need for and significant return on investment from RIO program services, we urge you to increase the amount of dollars in the overall account from $120 million and double the competition among national and regional intermediaries to $50.5 million. 2, ensure national and regional intermediaries can compete for reentry serving both adults and youth. Under the fiscal year 21 appropriations bill, funding for national and regional intermediaries is restricted for youth employment activities. Because justice-involved youth and formerly incarcerated adults require different services, we recommend national and regional intermediaries to be allowed to allow the use of funds to serve adults in addition to youth. 3, utilize national intermediaries with recognized expertise. It is important that national intermediary organizations receiving federal reentry funding have nationally recognized expertise, existing infrastructure, and large networks of employers and community relationships to ensure that federal investments are deployed quickly and effectively. 4, additionally, we recommend changes to the program model to reduce recidivism and increase success for reentering individuals, including wraparound services. Formerly incarcerated individuals need support in many areas, including digital learning, housing, transportation, childcare, child support obligations, and reunifying with children. A national intermediary with wraparound services like the Urban League can meet these needs in one place, increasing the likelihood of success for clients. Workforce-centric cognitive behavioral therapy, also known as CBT. Workforce CBT focuses on helping clients address behavioral challenges related to work, like managing anxiety during a job search, navigating professional relationships, and communicating in the workplace. Pre-release engagement, allowing community-based organizations access to a correctional facility so that they can work with individuals prior to release to co-create an employment plan would help set up re-entering individuals for success. Finally, we recommend diversifying eligible reentry serving providers by providing grants so returning citizens can access programs outside of the higher education system that fit their needs and strengthen the connection between reentry and apprenticeship so these individuals can earn while they learn. We appreciate the subcommittee's interest in authorizing reentry programming into federal law. This is an area where there is much need for investment and reimagining to ensure returning citizens can retool, secure employment opportunities, and transition back into their communities. I look forward to answering any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Scott. And now we'll hear from Mr. Kiesling. Welcome.
Thank you. Chair Wilson and Chair Scott and Ranking Member Murphy and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me to testify today. My name is Greg Kiesling, and I'm the president of Recycle Force, a nonprofit employment social enterprise, or ESE, delivering comprehensive recycling services to businesses in order to provide life-changing employment opportunities for formerly incarcerated individuals. Our model is called ABC, Any Job, Better Job, Career. You'll find details of the ABC model in my written testimony, along with a very brief video that I think will give you a good visual of what we've been doing here in Indianapolis, Indiana over the past decade. But the short version is this. We serve high-risk people who are coming home from prison and jail. All are under compliance monitoring and are required to work. We serve this population because research shows this is where we can have the greatest impact, both to increase employment and to preserve public safety. Our employment social enterprise employs high-risk individuals while they are under oversight and most at risk of returning to crime. But we don't just employ people, we also provide education, portable and stackable credentials, mental health and substance abuse treatment, banking assistance, financial planning, and perhaps most importantly, we help clients stay compliant with criminal justice oversight. Our credentials are very focused on the type of jobs that are available for those we employ and transition on. They include OSHA, Certified Logistics Associate, Powered Industrial Truck, and HAZWOPER 40, among many others. All these credentials prepare our workers to move to the next phase. As oversight lessens and if people have achieved their credentials, we transition about 60% of our workers to the next phase, the better job, where they work with our alternative staffing partner Keys to Work. This phase is not subsidized employment, but some of the wraparound services like mental health, treatment, and compliance monitoring are grant funded. And from this B section of our model, employers then hire permanently in good paying living wage opportunities, the career. Again, ABC, any job, better job, career. A good example is our local Indianapolis Department of Public Works and the ASME Union. They've already hired 41 people from our program. Our city has done a good job of making positions available for those under criminal justice oversight. And because we are the crossroads of America, many logistics firms have located here. So the logistics firms and their distribution centers are also big hires of our folks after the transitional period. Wages are way up in this field, and our workers can make well above $15 per hour. We have developed our model with significant support from DOL and the RIO program over the past decade, including a random control trial the department funded known as the Enhanced Transitional Jobs Demonstration, or ETJD. We are in the early stages of refining our model to serve out-of-school justice-involved youth, perhaps the hardest population of all. But as we do so, we need more rigorous research, including more random control trials. The research and continued funding can help grow the employment social enterprise field, like it has helped Recycle Force here in Indianapolis. You know, most workforce development professionals do not consider themselves crime fighters. But in so many ways, the funding the RIO program supplies to ESEs like us does just that. As Father Greg Boyle from Homeboys Industries says, nothing can stop a bullet like a job. The people we serve deserve their second chance. We think our model does that and also helps preserve public safety. When you watch our video, which I encourage you to do, you will meet some of the people who we have helped. People like Rob, Andrew, and Amanda, all who are moving forward from their past mistakes. I urge all of you to move forward with continued funding for the RIO program and to support US DOL and ETA and this important project by making certain we continue to have available random control trials and research. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Kiesling. And now we'll hear from Ms. Lattimore. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Scott, Chair Wilson, Ranking Member Fox, Ranking Member Murphy, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me to testify today. My name is Pamela Lattimore, and I am the Senior Director for Research Development for the Division for Applied Justice Research at RTI International. To briefly introduce myself, I have been conducting research on interventions for justice-involved individuals, including federal initiatives such as the Second Chance Act, since I was in graduate school at the University of North Carolina in the 1980s. Prior to joining RTI in 1998, I was a visiting scientist and then division director at DOJ's National Institute of Justice, where I conducted research on criminal behavior and oversaw NIJ's corrections research portfolio. To set the stage, even though we have seen some decline in prison and community supervision populations over the last several years, there are still approximately 2 million individuals in our prisons and jails, most of whom will return to our communities, and nearly 5 million others are currently in our communities on probation or parole. These justice-involved individuals generally lack education and employment experience, and they often have challenges including behavioral health issues such as drug use. Education and workforce programs offer a solution to the employment and educational needs of those involved with the justice system, offering transformative opportunities that can lead to a better life for the individuals and their families and safer communities. Criminologists have posited that desisting from criminal behavior may require an individual to transform to a self that believes they can attain a more positive and productive future. Education is a recognized process for supporting transformation. All of us in this room owe at least some of who we are to the education that has been afforded to us. The return on investment for correctional educational programs is well documented. A recent study estimated that every $1 invested in these programs saved taxpayers $4 to $5 in reincarceration costs in just the 3 years following program participation. Others estimate lifetime returns on programs for youth at 8 to 1 and for adults at 18 to 1. I would now like to offer several suggestions related to program design and research based on my work for the committee to consider. First, program offerings in correctional facilities should ensure that participants are able to earn stackable credentials that will lead to living wage employment with career advancement opportunities. For example, programs that lead to credentials in construction trades or commercial driver's licenses offer opportunities to earn living wages and respond to our current national labor shortages. Second, earning while learning programs should be encouraged. Most individuals in prisons and jails are eager to participate in programs, but there are substantial drop-offs in participation following release. Earned financial support may be the best route to encourage participation and completion. Third, robust evaluations are needed that are realistic in expectation and supportive of iterative improvement in education and employment programs. Fourth, more research is needed on what works for whom and how much is needed. And we also need to understand how education and employment skills fit within the constellation of overall needs of justice-involved individuals. Finally, recidivism should not be the primary measure for assessing education and employment-focused reentry programs. For education programs, first we must look at other outcome measures, including program completion, credentials earned, wages, and the quality of employment. I provide additional details in support of these recommendations for the record. Thank you again for this opportunity, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We will now hear from Ms. Safstrom. Welcome.
Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Fox, Chairwoman Wilson, Ranking Member Murphy, and distinguished members of the House Education and Labor Subcommittee on Higher Education and Workforce Investment. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today and for your leadership on the important issue of second chance hiring. My name is Wendy Safstrom, and I'm the Executive Director of the SHRM Foundation. The SHRM Foundation is the nonprofit affiliate of the Society for Human Resource Management, the world's largest professional society for human resource leaders. With more than 300,000 HR and business executive members in 165 countries, SHRM sits at the intersection of work, workers in the workplace, impacting the lives of more than 115 million workers and their families globally every single day. A pillar of SHRM's work is advancing policy that creates a more equitable world of work. The SHRM Foundation amplifies those efforts by inspiring, educating, and mobilizing HR professionals to lead positive social change in the workplace. We develop and curate strategies and programming designed to help HR professionals provide equitable opportunities to individuals seeking the dignity of work, including the nearly 70 million Americans, that is 1 in 3 adults who have a criminal record. Our Getting Talent Back to Work initiative, launched in 2019 by SHRM and now operated by the SHRM Foundation, started as a call to action by asking employers to publicly pledge to consider qualified individuals with criminal records for jobs within their organizations. And in December 2020, SHRM Foundation relaunched the initiative to include new tools and resources, including a self-assessment tool, an online educational program for HR professionals, and commenced the launch of marketing, communications, and PR strategies that better tell the story and business benefits of hiring individuals with criminal records. Getting Talent Back to Work has provided resources to 20,000 users thus far, and it's making a difference. A labor shortage and a battle for talent is looming. Employers who embrace second chance hiring could have a significant leg up on the competition. A recently released 2021 SHRM research study found nearly half of business leaders believe their organization should offer training, guidance, or mentorship opportunities to workers with criminal records as they begin a return to work. HR professionals understand the business case and the social imperative for hiring individuals with a criminal record. Savings and productivity gains for organizations can be significant. Their turnover rate for employees with criminal records is 13% lower than that for the general population. And according to SHRM research, 81% of business leaders and 85% of HR professionals believe workers with criminal records perform their jobs about the same or better than workers without criminal records. Second chance hiring can be a key component of an organization's DE&I strategy. In the US alone, the burden of incarceration is borne disproportionately by Black and Hispanic Americans. When companies do not include hiring people with criminal records in their organizations, it has an inordinate effect on those applicants, who we have found are likely to have different abilities, different education levels, and economic statuses, making it even more challenging to build a diverse team. HR professionals recognize that diverse teams result in more innovation, faster problem solving, better engagement, and increased financial performance. And a study in 2019 found that companies that led in ethnic and cultural diversity had 36% more profitability than companies without such diversity. Profitable businesses support the livelihoods of the individuals and the communities in which they work and live. The SHRM Foundation is beginning to lead the activation of our Getting Talent Back to Work initiative, leveraging the commitments of employers and HR professionals who've been inspired and educated through our programming. Planning is underway to implement a place-based employment ecosystem, a pilot program in Charlotte, North Carolina. SHRM Foundation will partner with the Center for Community Transitions, a nonprofit organization founded to help strengthen the community and reduce recidivism by providing people with criminal records and their families the tools and resources they need to rebuild their lives. Through this pilot, and by establishing and working with partners from state and local workforce development agencies, employers and HR professionals, and community-based organizations, will test to frame their work that can be evaluated and scaled pending efficacy and outcomes. And as you consider reauthorizing the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, I offer 3 recommendations. First, evaluate all program providers or grant recipients based on employment, earnings, and recidivism reduction. Intervention strategies that have demonstrated promise, such as subsidized or transitional employment, should be prioritized. Second, ensure there's a close relationship between reentry, employment opportunities, supported programs, and employers by requiring individuals responsible for candidate recruitment and initial assessment to be partners in any REO-funded grant making. And third, I encourage Congress to consider making the work opportunity tax credit permanent to allow employers to fully incorporate it into their hiring strategies and to increase the promotion of the tax credit throughout the workforce development system. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. Under Committee Rule 9A, we will now question witnesses under the 5-minute rule. I will be recognizing subcommittee members in seniority order. Again, to ensure that the members' 5-minute rule is adhered to, staff will be keeping track of time, and the timer will show a blinking light when time has expired. Please be attentive to the time. Wrap up when your time is over and re-mute your microphone. As chair, I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. My life's work has been centered around Black men and boys. Ms. Safstrom, in your testimony, you note that 1 in 3 Black men have a felony record compared with just 8% of the general US adult population. Regardless of criminal record, Black men are less likely than white applicants to receive a call back from employers to begin with. Tell me, how can we address employer biases towards this population who may face the dual challenge of overcoming stigma associated with their race and their criminal justice involvement?
Exactly what the work and the mission of the SHRM Foundation is all about in this regard as it relates to our Getting Talent Back to Work initiative. I think it comes from making sure that our HR professionals are informed and educated, that they understand the challenges and the barriers that individuals face, and the cycle often of poverty and struggle that they have within their communities, and how employment directly relates to helping to break that cycle. I think that now more so than ever before, identifying and hiring and retaining top talent with different perspectives, different skill sets, different viewpoints will make businesses even more successful. And as HR professionals contribute to the overall business success of their organizations, they're going to have to start thinking differently, looking at different populations, leading with empathy, asking informed questions and informing themselves. And that's a huge, huge priority for SHRM and the SHRM Foundation. It starts with inspiring inspiring HR professionals to think differently, to act differently, and then providing them the tools and the resources that they need to educate themselves so that they're making informed decisions and recommendations when it comes to identifying sources of talent.
Thank you so much. Ms. Scott, congratulations on the Urban Leagues Reentry Program. What does you have partial funding from the Department of Education, the Department of Labor. What does the evidence tell us about return on investment of reentry employment programs as far as your experience?
Thank you for that question, Representative. So while I am not an economist, but I do read economists, I know that if incarceration costs the American people $258,000 per crime. And in addition, that's $96,000 per incarceration cost. It's cost the economy $56 to $57 billion that's lost because of incarceration. By an investment of just $10,000 to $15,000 a year per participant, we actually end up saving the economy money and saving our communities money while keeping it safer and saving costs on public safety.
Tell us about the wraparound supportive services that you have as a part of your program.
Thank you so much for this question. Yes. So for wraparound service, first we need to appreciate the struggles that reentry adults and youth face. Many of them exit with health concerns. Many of them exit without any professional, personal supports. Many do not have any financial standing alone. When they leave incarceration, they are given a bus pass and whatever financial resources are on their person. And yet they are expected to find housing, to find employment within a set date based on whatever their conditions of parole or probation are. Wraparound services in multi-service organizations are crucial in helping those individuals to not recidivate, being able to connect individuals to public housing or housing opportunities, to be able to connect them with healthcare opportunities, but then also provide education and skill development courses so that they may be able to develop the skills, employment-informed skills that are necessary for their local market itself. And then also those programs that do provide an earn and learn, such as apprenticeships, allow them or ease the financial burden of trying to find a livable wage while finding all of these other resources so that they can focus in on reintegrating into society, giving back the way they want to give back, and becoming whole people in their whole communities again.
Thank you so much. Mr. Keesling, tell us, what is the criteria to determine individuals at medium to high risk of recidivism, and how do we help them when we target WIOA related programming? Very quickly.
Okay, thank you. The IRAS, we have a test here today called the IRAS that measures risk assessment and return to crime. So those that are deemed high risk are then referred to us by criminal justice oversight, parole, probation, correction, and they immediately get a job when they start.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And now we will go to questions from the members of the committee. The first person who will be asking questions today is Representative Comer. Representative Comer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question is Ms. Safstrom. Relationships with employers must be prioritized when getting vulnerable individuals back into the workforce. I've seen a success story firsthand in my district in Kentucky. A reentry program developed by a detention facility in McCracken County, and that's Paducah, Kentucky, worked with regional employers and the local community college to prioritize an educational curriculum paired with skills development needed by local employers. They've been recognized by the Department of Labor and the Delta Regional Authority for their efforts. As the economy reopens, what must be done to mirror this success and bring employers to the table in reentry efforts, especially as we consider WIOA reauthorization?
I think an amplification of what you just described has to be shared. Again, part of the mission and the work of the foundation is really to share with all employers, large, medium, and small employers, how other employers in other communities are engaging and actually making it work, that they are formulating partnerships with community-based organizations, workforce development agencies, and have shared outcomes in terms of intending to employ those that they are serving in their local communities. And part of what we're doing in this pilot that we're crafting in Charlotte is exactly that. We're working with each of the organizations within the city of Charlotte we know have a vested interest and are critical stakeholders in ultimately employing this particular population. Once we've learned what went well, where we could improve, our goal is to amplify those outcomes, make any adjustments, and then pilot and then scale those pilot outcomes to other communities and other cities. But I'd love to learn more specifically about what you're doing so we can talk about that as part of our marketing communications and PR, our storytelling that goes on at the SHRM Foundation.
Great, be happy to share that with
Terrific.
you more in detail. My last question, Dr. Lattimore, can you give us some insight on what shortcomings past reentry programs have experienced and what pitfalls should future programs avoid in order to support successful reentry and effectively use taxpayer dollars?
Yes, thank you, Representative. I'm happy to address that. I think that and I appreciated Ms. Scott's reference to wraparound services. I think that we all know that many of the individuals who are justice involved have a whole range of needs across, mental health, substance abuse, and they come out of prison or jail with little skills and are faced with trying to get their lives back together without any support. And it's really critical, I think, for us to be able to provide that support and help them overcome the challenges. So I think one of the problems, as I note in my written remarks, is that oftentimes grant programs, I believe it's my experience, are just too short to effectively develop, implement, refine a program, and at the same time conduct a rigorous evaluation to assess what the outcomes of that program is. providing wraparound services, identifying all the providers and those kinds of things, as other panelists who are actively engaged in doing that, is hard work and challenging work. And so making sure that there's adequate time and adequate funding to support these wraparound services, I think is critical. And so many, I'm more familiar with the programs that are funded by the Justice Department, the Bureau of Justice Assistance. And so many of those grants are 2 years, sometimes 3 years. And that is just not an adequate amount of time to tackle a really complicated and complex problem.
Well, great. Hopefully, we can have more success stories with this moving forward. The biggest problem in America right now from an economic standpoint is the shortage of workers. And there's never been a better opportunity now to get people back into society, back into the workforce, to get people out of poverty and into the workforce than now. So this is a great opportunity. Hopefully we can work together in a bipartisan way. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Representative Comer. I really appreciate your remarks. I mean, it's just a breath of fresh air to hear you say what you just said. Thank you so much. And now, Mr. Takano of California.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. As you stated, Madam Chair, the United States spends at least $80 billion annually on incarceration, far more than the roughly $4 billion that WIOA Title I workforce development programs expend. Yet an increased investment in employment services for justice-involved individuals may be cost-effective to the extent it contributes to lower recidivism and reduced spending by the criminal justice system. Ms. Scott, you wrote in your testimony that if 100 formerly incarcerated individuals are given employment, they would contribute $1.9 million in income taxes. Your testimony recommends increased funding for reentry programs as a part of a WIOA reauthorization. What would be the impact of this increased spending?
Oh, thank you very much, Representative Takano, for that question. I am not prepared to give that information because I'm not an economist. However, the National Urban League is prepared to respond to you with more qualified response.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Can you tell me why is engaging with justice-involved individuals pre-release important to helping them secure employment upon release?
Absolutely. Thank you so very much for that question. As I mentioned a little bit a while ago, that individuals, when they are released, are only given transportation off the premises and whatever resources they have on their person or whatever they had beforehand. Many individuals who are incarcerated, there's strong correlation between individuals who are homeless and those individuals who are become incarcerated or end up incarcerated. They find that individual may be homeless, who is homeless prior to incarceration is 15 times likely to be to find themselves incarcerated. The unemployment rate for incarcerated individuals is 36%. It's 44% for African American women. A lot of that is because they don't have a plan once they are released. They don't have the social connections. Many of them may not have stable housing, particularly older reentry individuals have health issues that have either developed or lingered during incarceration. And so when they leave, they don't know the social systems. They don't know how to enroll in programs. And so being able as a national intermediary to have access into the correctional facility so that a counselor whom they would meet post-release is there to create an employment program for them. That means that person then leaves knowing where they need to attend, who they need to speak to, and know what their treatment plan or their program plan will look like upon release. It gives them literally a lifeline and a plan so that they can stay focused on what's most important.
Ms. Scott, that's an awful lot that you just told us, and the details, I'm sure. Well, I mean, we could spend a lot longer on this topic. I'm sure that we have very uneven programs in terms of their continuity for things like mental health care and drug treatment. I mean, that probably does not follow the formerly incarcerated into life outside of being incarcerated. But even something as basic as getting an identification card, an ID, is not certain. Many Americans don't know that that's just not something that a formerly incarcerated person would have. I know that one state, Virginia, has taken this on, and California is trying to actually pass something more comprehensive in terms of making sure that you're issued, without an ID, you have a hard time getting employment, securing housing, applying for public benefits, obtaining insurance, cashing paychecks or opening an account, traveling domestically, buying or renting a car, applying for a commercial license, whether you're trying to drive a truck or a car, or getting married. So that plan you're talking about, just trying to get a plan together without an ID, and many people don't know this, that's very uncertain that a formerly incarcerated person would even leave without an ID. And I'm a little self-serving here because I want to just mention I have a bill, HR 1315, which would greatly improve or enhance the responsibility of the Bureau of Prisons to ensure that federal prisoners leave with an ID, and we also would assist the states in making sure that happens. My time has run out. I just want to make sure that I got that commercial out there. But Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you so much. We'll make sure to watch out for HR 1315, identification for formerly incarcerated. That is great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we'll hear from our ranking member, Miss Dr. Murphy of North Carolina.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And just specifically also thanks to the witnesses today. It's really a powerful testimony. And this is obviously something that is a bipartisan issue, things that we can really work on. My personal desire, while it's not the purview of this committee, is that we try to get to these young men and women before they ever get incarcerated. Wouldn't investment in them before any of this happened yield us much greater results? That's a different issue, one in which I think is actually equally, if not more important, but not the purview of this committee. So, Ms. Safstrom, I just have one Safstrom, I'm sorry, I have a question for you. An important component of WIOA was the expansion of pay for performance opportunities in workforce development. These programs allow for experimentation and innovation, while also ensuring that taxpayer dollars are spent on what works best. How could you tell us pay performance would enhance work that is done at the federal, state, and local level to help support the reentry transition efforts?
And thank you for that question. I think it will really encourage creativity. I think it will help foster innovation. It will allow, especially, I think now so more than ever before perhaps, is the moment for employers and HR professionals to contribute ideas perhaps to a challenge that have not necessarily been brought to the forefront. So I think that HR professionals are very familiar with accountability for turnover rates, for hiring rates, for promotions, and for retention rates. And so they understand the notion of pay for performance. So I think the ability to have those conversations, to talk about that issue with HR professionals, to understand some of the human capital metrics and how they can apply to this particular instance could be very powerful.
Excellent, excellent. Because, in all this, we obviously want the results to be great, but we also want accountability. We don't want there to be just pouring money into an empty bucket. We have to have accountability of what programs work, don't work, and be nimble in moving them. So thank you for those comments. Dr. Lattimore, it's always good to have a North Carolinian on the committee, and I'd like you for taking time to share with us about your important research that you've done on how society can best serve the reentry population. Let me throw this at you. How do you feel the evaluation efforts for government programs differ from those that are done in the business world? Are there lessons that can be learned from these differences? Can government learn from business, and can business learn from government? What would you recommend that the federal reentry program, how do they incorporate these efforts in their evaluations based upon what is currently being done in industry? In other words, how can the business community help our federal government do things more efficiently and more accurately?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. And you actually touched on something that is very near to my heart, which is I think the primary difference is the extent to which private businesses engage in performance measurement, and that in itself allows them to understand, their processes. It allows them to refine their processes to, be more efficient, to assure that they're getting the outcomes that they want. And I came to this based on my efforts over the years to use administrative agency data to evaluate, federally funded programs, and have found and continue to find that the computer systems and the management information systems that are part of many of these agencies are woefully inadequate. And it means that the agencies can't even know what their own performance is. They basic things like working with some jails on pretrial work right now, and even knowing the average length of stay for people being held pretrial in jails, you find out that jail management information systems don't even have a marker to say that someone's being held pretrial. And McDonald's would never not know. They know exactly how long it takes to do everything, and the best ways to do those things. So, I mean, I think that we need to, as an evaluator, it's not self-serving to say that I think that we need to shift a little bit from talking all the time about evaluation and point out that a lot of what underlies evaluation is actually good performance metrics. Sure. And having those kinds of measurement systems in place. And so I would encourage investment in that along with the investment in programming.
Thank you, Doctor. And that is critically important. I'll just say we can't put forth these programs without accountability and evaluation to know what really is what's best and what works best for the American taxpayer and for those in the population that we're serving. I believe my time is up. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I appreciate the time to speak with the committee members.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Murphy. You started off speaking my language, prevention. So that sounds great, and I appreciate that your comments. And now, Ms. Jayapal from Washington.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you for your leadership on this issue as well as this committee. And I too want to associate myself with the remarks of my colleague, Congressman Murphy, about how important it is to invest in people before they're incarcerated. And I actually think that a lot of what this committee does is to think about exactly that. $80 billion a year to keep roughly 2.3 million people incarcerated in a system that is neither rehabilitative nor restorative is a true waste, not only of money, but of human potential. Too often people are released into communities traumatized, unhoused, unemployed, and burdened by a criminal record. I used to represent, before I came to Congress, in the state Senate in Washington State, one of the most diverse districts in our state. And I saw this all the time, and we worked on this issue all the time. And I wanted to share the story today of Aaron, who is a constituent of mine, who was referred by King County Work Release to Neighborhood House, which is an incredible social service agency in Seattle, in December of 2019. Prior to his incarceration, Aaron had many years of experience in construction and welding. However, upon his release from incarceration, Aaron had trouble even landing a survival job due to his ongoing struggle with chemical dependence and finding stable housing as he alternated staying in his car and crashing with friends. Ms. Scott, this sounds like a catch-22 to me. People like Aaron struggle with getting jobs because of unstable housing and chemical dependence, and yet they need the income and stability of work to help with their recovery and to pay for stable housing. What is the difference in outcomes related to both recidivism and employment between programs that offer solely employment services rather than both employment and social services?
Thank you so much, Representative Jayapal, for that question and to bring up this important issue. I think it's very important for us to continue to focus and appreciate the myriad of challenges that the reentry community face during and post-release. One of them is, as I believe you had mentioned, of drug and alcohol addiction. We know that 60% of prisoners struggle with it during release. We know that 76% struggle with mental health and using substance abuse as a means to cope. And so just that alone is a challenge for someone who's being released without any supports, without any financial opportunities, and with little to no skills. We know that many individuals, I believe it's 60%, who are incarcerated do not have a high school degree, are high school dropouts, and do not have a diploma. That is a barrier to identifying and finding employment. Without having access to multi-service, strong non-for-profits, such as the National Urban League and Neighborhood Works, an individual is left alone to try to braid together what they need to go and find and sign up for healthcare, to find an adult basic education program, to sign up for a drug cessation or recovery program. And instead, having one place where they can go, having a counselor on a case with a case management structure makes a huge difference in helping them to stay focused on what they need and having supports to overcome the many barriers that they actually have and present with.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. In fact, Aaron did get that support and he was able to end his chemical dependency, accept a job with a local manufacturing company and access housing assistance. But he still is working to get certification so he can find work in his area of expertise and with higher wages. So let's just say Aaron finally gets his certification and his ideal job. Mr. Kiesling, what are some of the lasting barriers to employment for people like Aaron?
Well, I think for many employers, they have background checks that look at the felony background. And so while we're doing a much, much better job after the pandemic and the labor shortage where employers are beginning to look at their restrictions, it still is there. And we've launched an expungement process here, but it takes 5 to 8 years before you're eligible for expungement. So during that period of time, employers are using the felony background as a reason to profile people out. So it is really a major, major problem. But I'm encouraged that we're making progress. The labor shortage is really getting employers that are willing to hire this population to really relook at their hiring practices.
I think that's so important. My time has expired, but I think this cultural shift that we need employers to make is so critical. So thank you very much, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you. And now, Mr. Grothman, Wisconsin.
You got that very good. Thank you. I wish you were running all my hearings. First question, and I guess any one of you could take it. I am been a supporter of something called Ozaukee County Jail Literacy back in my district. And I know the importance of literacy in existing in our society, and they do a great job. Could any one of you comment on the percent of people who are functionally literate when they go out of jail or prison compared to how they are when they get out, and could maybe some correlations between functional literacy and the ability to operate productively in our society? Do we have any statistics on that?
We don't have any direct statistics, but we do see that people's reading levels and comprehension levels are low. There is tape testing that's done.
Okay.
But I don't have the details.
Okay, well, it's important for people who are going to be involved in this issue to know the number of people who are literate and not, because then we can kind of measure how well they're doing when they get out in society. I don't know how you function in society if you don't know how to read, but I think you will find a lot of people in corrections institutions are not literate. So I would suggest the four of you look into that. Next question I have, I always think a strong family background is important. Do any of you have any information, perhaps Dr. Lattimore, on family setting, that correlation between adapting back in society, if you're moving back home with a husband or wife, if you're moving back home with parents, any comments or any studies along those lines?
There has been, thank you for the question. There have been programs that have focused on family strengthening. Most women who are incarcerated have children. Many men also have children, although the burden on the men and women is very different. And actually, childcare is another financial cost for and barrier for women when they get out of prison. And so I think that
Right. Do we know the number, for example, who get up, wind up being married or living with their parents? Or are there any studies along those lines indicating success or not success if you are living with the spouse or parents?
I would have to get back to you on that. There have been some studies that have been done on that. That's not something that I, right off the top of my head, know the numbers on, but we'd be happy to get those numbers
Yeah,
back to you.
I always feel when we talk about corrections or criminal justice problems, family background is so important. And it always bothers me, whether it's this or drug abuse or whatever, nobody's got the statistics. And I always feel like, one of the reasons for a lot of the societal problems we've had in the last 5 years is the government kind of encouraging a broken family. I wish people who deal on this topic would weigh in and try to have people get statistics. I'll give you guys another question. In Wisconsin, we have something called the Huber program. I assume they have similar programs in other states, in which prior to release, you work in the community. Okay, maybe you're let out 8 hours a day or something and you go back. But as the result, when you leave, you have a job already. Now, we recently changed things in Wisconsin so that your final institution you're in is near your job. So you don't say on a federal level, say you don't return to Kentucky, but your Huber job was in Wisconsin or something. Can you comment on the percentage of people leaving either federal prison or the state prisons you're familiar with who have a full-time job before they leave, and those that don't, and kind of comment on the importance of that?
I will quickly jump in and say 100% of the people who are referred to us have that job. That's our model. They have the immediate job. We serve about 300 people per year, but there are about 8,000 people who need this service in Indianapolis alone. So where we can expand employment social enterprises to be able to employ more people immediately upon release and connect with them prior to release from prison and jail, so we can develop the pathway. But that's exactly what we do. That's exactly our model. And it's the #1 way to reduce crime and get people back connected in the labor force is to have a subsidized job immediately upon release.
Well, I don't think in Wisconsin it has to be subsidized. Why would you feel it has to be subsidized?
Because of all the different oversight requirements. It's very difficult for people to work and still have to take drug tests. They have to leave regular employers that find it very difficult to oversight people that are constantly having to leave. Our workers are able to work about 25 to 30% of their time, but the other is related to oversight requirements.
Yeah, I'd familiarize yourself with what goes on in Wisconsin, because largely in Wisconsin, what we call these Huber jobs I don't believe they're subsidized at all. And it's a way for people to transition right away back in society. Thank you for giving me another 30 seconds. I appreciate it.
Don't say I never was kind.
No, I know. I owe you. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from Ms. Edgar Fernandez, New Mexico. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for holding this, because I think what we're looking for is ways in which the federal government and through the use of WIOA can actually support incarcerated individuals so that indeed they're able to reunite with their families and be part of strong families, but that sometimes there's some extra help that is needed, and which, as our Representative Jayapal pointed out, would save money in the end. So I want to focus a bit on women who are involved with the justice system and the distinct challenges that they might have, including employment. Ms. Scott, you touched a bit on that. And also in your testimony, you said that oftentimes mothers must engage with family court and child protective services to reunify with the children, and that homelessness is higher for formerly incarcerated women, especially women of color, than formerly incarcerated men. And then we know that many of the jobs that are available to the most justice-involved individuals, construction, have not traditionally employed significant numbers of women. So Ms. Smith, Ms. Scott, could you expand a bit on the unique challenges that justice involved women face with obtaining and maintaining employment, and if you have suggestions on what we in Congress can do to help address those challenges?
Thank you so very much, Representative Fernandez, for that question and this lead-in. Yes, I find that we don't talk enough about women in reentry and their challenges. As mentioned, the largest the largest demographic of homeless formerly incarcerated are African-American women. And their unemployment rate is at 44%. A lot of that is because their primary focus is on family reunification. And so for many mothers coming out or returning to community, they have to engage with family court. They have to engage with child protective services. So one of the challenges that can happen if an individual chooses to find employment, going to courts, adhering to visitation scheduling, regular drug testing in order to be with your own children do not always complement scheduling at work. The second component is that if you are homeless and you are a mother and you have children, you are actually put to the front of the line for affordable housing. However, so that is a unintended motivation for mothers to focus more on regaining their children, because that will lead to stable housing, prioritizing that process over looking for work. We also should mention the overwhelming number of returning women have domestic violence as a history. And so without really addressing that component, that can become problematic in the workplace if it is not treated. It can manifest itself such as conflict in the workplace. And that's why we recommend cognitive behavioral therapy. And then of course, childcare and many women, more women, particularly African-American women, engage in apprenticeships than men do. However, some of those jobs do not operate during regularly scheduled jobs. And therefore, regularly scheduled childcare isn't always available for a mother who's working the third shift. So I think that there are many things that we should really look at in the ecosystem to support women.
Thank you so much. And I want to highlight a program in my district at Messalens Community College. And when I met with them, they noted that 1/3 of their students are incarcerated students from their correctional facility nearby. And they said that they're some of their best students. Ms. Lipmore, can you tell me what the research shows on employment rates being improved after attaining a degree or certificate while incarcerated? You know, what we need to be doing to assist in making sure those community colleges build on that education and connect people with jobs after release.
Yes, thank you for that question. And I'm very happy to hear that you've got a really active community college-based program for the individuals in your district. I think where that doesn't happen, where you don't get that coordination, is a missed opportunity. Particularly if those programs can be continued after individuals are released from prison or jail. And I mean, the evidence suggests that individuals with education that actually obtained education during incarceration generally do come out and perform better than others. I would like to quickly too also point out that it's been the experience from our research, this relates to your previous question, that women also come out of prison with many fewer family supports and support of positive peers than men do. And so the women, in addition to all of the challenges that you mentioned before, are facing these additional burdens. They have additional problems, and they're not getting anywhere near the support that men get when they were released from prison.
Thank you for your answer, and my time has expired. I yield back, Madam Chair. Thank you. Thank you very much. And now Representative Fulcher from Idaho.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Ranking Member, for putting this on. This is an important topic to me and to my state as well. We have a very large demographic where there's been needs for employment for a long time. Dairy segment, large dairies, ag sector and whatnot, even long before the current immigration crisis. We have been looking at ways to try to improve the percentage of employees that we might have available through incarcerated channels and whatnot. But with that, a question for Mr. Kiesling to start. My state also is in a unique situation because there's been this nationwide wave of marijuana legalization, and virtually every state that surrounds Idaho has legalized marijuana, mostly recreational, with the exception of Wyoming. And we've seen this very significant surge in incarcerations as a result of that. Have you seen that? Does that track in other areas from your perspective?
Well, certainly in Indiana, we may have a similar where we're surrounded by states where there's legalized marijuana, but all the people that come out of prison are prohibited. They're randomly drug test on a regular basis. So what we see happening are these can't avoid knockoffs that can pass the drug test. So people are moving into the the knockoff drugs, also opioids, methamphetamine, cocaine. That has become the most common drug use that we see are the type of drugs that can't be picked up on standard drug tests. And so it's a really big issue. We're a zero tolerance state in Indiana, so that you cannot drink or do any drugs whatsoever. If you test positive, it's it's a good chance you're going to get violated and sent back to prison. So it is a really major problem, but it's the the knockoff drugs more than the legal drugs that, or the legal marijuana coming in from other states that we're seeing.
Yeah, thank you for that. Shifting gears a little bit to Ms. Scott, I'd like to clarify on something that you had said earlier. Your local affiliates do this market analysis, and I'm interested in that market analysis and that process a little bit more. What if that analysis just shows that the needs are just way different than the available skill sets? What happens then? Ms. Scott, could you help me clarify that?
Sure. So first, when we talk about labor, we encourage all of our Urban League affiliates to consult the labor market information system to know what are established employers and needs in their community. And then we partner with training and education providers so to ensure that the skills that are being developed actually line up with what employers need as far as an occupation with skills. Are you
able to actually have some success? If that gap is just very, very wide, are you able to have some success in bridging it?
Yes, absolutely, we do. So an example that we have, now it's not exclusive for reentry, but it's for all adults, is that we do have a tech training program. And we originally went with a traditional training program such as systems analyst, but we recognize that when you go to different markets, the tech needs are different. If you go into Seattle, it's coding is what they need. If you go to the Midwest, it's project management is what they need. And the thing is that that's what's very important when you do have education and skill development programs, for that there's a strong connection between what employers need, what the market needs, and what the market demands, and then connecting individuals. As mentioned earlier, there may be some individuals who may have some skill gaps. That is where multi-service organizations can help bridge that. So if somebody has low literacy, then we connect them to an adult basic education literacy program.
Great. Thank you for that. I'm sorry to move so quickly, but I just have just a little bit left. A quick question for Ms. Safstrom, please. Your organization has been involved in getting talent back to work. And once they get involved, once this talent does plug into what would be termed as subsidized employment, how long do they tend to stay? Is it truly a transition, or does it tend to be a longer employment range?
Thank you for that question. It's not necessarily subsidized employment. What we're finding overall is that overall turnover of individuals who have a criminal record is lower, if not the same, as individuals who do not have a criminal record. And that's been direct research that we've done both in 2019 and then reiterated or refreshed, if you will, in 2021.
Thank you for that. I'm out of time. Madam Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And now, Mr. Jones of New York.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I appreciate your making reentry employment opportunities the focus of today's hearing. I also want to thank our witnesses for sharing their perspectives with us all today. As you know, the United States incarcerates more people than any other country in the world at great cost to our society. According to one study, our country spends $80 billion a year on incarceration and up to $1 trillion in collateral costs to communities and to families annually. Unfortunately, we only spend a fraction of that on workforce development programs that help people gain the skills they need to obtain good paying, long-term jobs. A decade ago, when I worked at the Department of Justice in the Office of Legal Policy, we studied how to reduce recidivism and improve reentry for people leaving federal incarcerated settings. Gainful employment was at the top of the list when it came to the factors that reduce an individual's likelihood to commit crimes in the future. Stable employment helps people live with dignity, provide for their families, contribute to society, and ultimately stay out of prison. As we consider reauthorization of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, it is critical that we include a permanent program to help formerly incarcerated people return to the workforce. Ms. Lattimore, youth and young adults who are involved with the criminal justice system face some unique challenges. In fact, no other age demographic is more vulnerable to being rearrested than those individuals under the age of 25. What approaches to reentry have shown the most success with this population?
Thank you very much for the question, Representative. I think we come back to the same point that we've been talking about today, an opportunity to get education that leads to a living wage, an opportunity for career advancement, an opportunity to initiate a process by which an individual can actually believe. Many of our youth who are involved in the criminal justice system come from circumstances where they've never been afforded the opportunity to get a good education. They don't have good examples of that. So, programs that provide peer support and mentoring as part of a wraparound service, education and employment skills development programs, I think are the things that we need to look at when we look at our youth.
And how can we improve the public workforce system to ensure that DOL-funded programs advance projects that link supportive housing, peer advocacy and support, and employment and education programs for justice-involved youth and young adults?
Yeah, thank you for that question as well. And I have primarily studied these issues from the Justice Department side, from the criminal justice system perspective. And one thing I think is important is in exactly what you touched on, is that there needs to be coordination among federal agencies who have programs that are impactful for justice-involved individuals. And that's not just education and labor, it's also SAMHSA and HHS, NIDA, Housing and Urban Development. All of these federal agencies provide services and programs. And I think it's really important that across the federal, it would be very nice if across the federal government, there could be collaboration and cooperation among the agencies so that you make sure that the programs are actually functioning collectively to address issues that individuals have.
Thank you for that. Ms. Scott, people of color face disproportionate barriers to employment upon release from incarceration. Your testimony states that formerly incarcerated African-American men have a 35% unemployment rate post-release, and that formerly incarcerated African-American women have a 44% unemployment rate. And of course, we know the COVID-19 pandemic has hit Black and Brown communities the hardest across the country. How do the programming interventions offered by the Urban League impact educational attainment, employment, and the likelihood of rearrest? You're muted.
Very sorry, rookie move. So yes, we do know that education outcomes has a direct correlation on success re-entering society and as a recidivism against re-arrest. What our Urban League programs do, every Urban League is a multi-service organization. So one of the first things that we do, we recommend every program has, is that we do an assessment. We assess education outcomes and skill sets. We assess what talents someone arrives with, and then we connect them with that program. And so for an individual who does not, particularly youth, there are many youth who do not have a high school diploma. We know that I believe is 80% have dropped out who end up in our system from high school. We know that 58% do not engage in any education opportunity while they are incarcerated. So youth programs should have a dual focus, both education and or employment. If it's education is to obtain that certification, it may then lead to an apprenticeship opportunity or enrollment in a 2-year higher education institution. If it is strictly an employment track, obviously having a high school diploma at minimum is an opportunity to qualify for an entry-level employment opportunity and also an apprenticeship.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. I yield back.
Now we'll hear from Representative Miller Meeks.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think it's interesting at a time when we're having difficulties with individuals in the workforce, and every employer I talk to is having challenges that are approximately 600,000 offenders are released from prison every year. And recently released prisoners have a 32% unemployment rate. So I think that this hearing and your testimony of the witnesses is extremely timely. One of the things that I've heard from employers in the past as well is that there's challenges with the legal community in hiring previously incarcerated individuals. And I was just wondering if any of the witnesses, but I'll also direct it to Mr. Kiesling, does the First Step Act, have you heard this as well? And is there action that we need to take? Does the First Step Act help in removing some of this legal liability that employers feel in hiring incarcerated individuals?
I think it's too early for us to know. We need more research to really know. But people who are released or put under monitoring, we have 4,000 people under electronic monitoring here in Indianapolis alone. And our big, we're the Silicon Valley of logistics here. And the distributions are very willing to hire, yet the electronic monitoring is a cell signal. It's very difficult to get through the warehouses. So it can be very hard for oversight and employers to work together to monitor this. So I just feel that we need better ways to provide oversight and for employers to be able to work with criminal justice oversight so they can manage people on their work site. But it's the First Step Back was a step, and it's still very early, and we'd like to see more research about it.
Thank you so much. And Ms. Safstrom, relationships with employers must be incorporated throughout workforce systems if programs are going to accomplish the end goal of getting individuals back into the workforce. We've had this in Iowa with some of our incarcerated individuals working in the home building industry. This allows both the workers and employers to benefit as we expand the talent pipeline and offer opportunities to more Americans. As we move through the other side of the pandemic and hopefully return to a tight labor market, which seems to be pretty tight already, what must be done to bring employers to the table in reentry efforts?
I think that we have, thank you for the question. I think we have a tremendous opportunity to engage employers more specifically in discussions going on in terms of the work, discussions going on at the workforce board level, so that the workforce development systems, so that the community-based organizations are very much up to speed in terms of where the labor market is headed, the future of work, the jobs are changing, ever changing. And I think increasingly employers need to be involved in the conversations in terms of what individuals are trained in for what roles, for what industry sectors, and where industry sectors and those jobs are actually moving in the future, not just for today, but certainly into the future, so that we're well prepared to rapidly upskill those individuals so they continue to stay employed.
Thank you. And you also mentioned that the work that your organization has been involved in regarding the national conversation among reentry through your Getting Talent Back to Work initiative and the Second Chance Business Coalition.
based on your work in this space, how do transitional jobs or subsidized employment impact outcomes for the reentry population as opposed to other efforts?
I think that's a critical element. I mean, the biggest challenge, obviously, for someone who's transitioning out of incarceration is to get that first job. And the Second Chance Business Coalition is really a group of large employers that are global in focus, but local in nature, and national in nature. In these particular conversations, we're all starting to ask those very similar questions. And I think as those conversations continue to move forward, that's the perspective we'll be able to bring back as members of the coalition and certainly as members of SHRM.
Thank you. And I think you underscored that this is a collaborative effort between the private sector, employers, and government, both at the local, state, and the federal level. So I appreciate that. Madam Chair and Ranking Member Murphy, Dr. Murphy, I appreciate the opportunity to ask questions, and I yield back my time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And now, Ms. Manning of North Carolina.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just a week ago, I was at an event in my community where two gentlemen who had been incarcerated came up specifically to talk to me about the importance of reentry programs, and particularly the wraparound services and what a difference they made in their ability to rebuild their lives. So I really appreciate you holding this hearing today. I'd like to start with Ms. Lattimore. You mentioned in your testimony that an emerging trend within criminology is to focus on identity change as a critical element in justice-involved individuals' successful transition back to their communities to attain a more positive and productive future. And I understand that research has indicated that justice-involved individuals need and benefit from access to mental health services, including cognitive behavioral therapy, which trains participants to adapt their thinking from destructive thinking to more positive thinking. So I'd like to ask you to elaborate on why access to mental health services, and particularly CBT, is so important as part of reentry employment programs.
Yeah, thank you, Congresswoman, for the question. I would point to some other research that I was engaged in a few years ago, that was focused on looking at traumatic brain injury among a released cohort of prisoners from actually South Carolina prisons. But we found the prevalence of traumatic brain injury to be very high. It was on the order of 50% or more of the individuals who were released from prison had experienced at least one incident that led to traumatic brain injury. And we know, the neuroscientists know, that individuals who have TBIs are much more likely to be prone to violence. They also have cognitive difficulties. Many of these are untreated. And so I think that cognitive behavior therapy and other kinds of programs that help individuals regulate their behavior goes a long way to a healthier pathway during the reentry process. It also, if it's acknowledged, can improve even actually behavior while people are incarcerated. But you have to be in a good place. You have to think that that engaging in a certain activity is going to result in a positive outcome in order to be able to move forward. The emerging literature, I mean, with cognitive behavior therapy, with educational programs, there's been some work done on fatherhood programs and parenting programs where, again, that's an identity transformation. If someone can see themselves as a parent with the responsibilities that come with parenthood, that kind of transformative activity, in addition to the kinds of transformations that can go on with education, also seem to lead people to try to find the way to be successful.
Thank you for that. Ms. Safstrom, in 2021, 84% of companies in manufacturing, construction, and utilities have hired justice-involved individuals, the most of any industries. And these companies' willingness to hire justice-involved individuals has presented great opportunities. So how can we engage other industry sectors to increase their hiring in this population? And what steps could the public workforce development system take to engage industries that have not traditionally been major employers of justice-involved individuals?
I think thank you for that question. The industries that you mentioned are very heavily involved in apprenticeship, which is a tremendous vehicle for individuals to either receive training while they're incarcerated, but certainly to go to work for an organization who is demonstrating a belief in that, not just giving them that first job, but really putting them on a career pathway. So I'd love to see some of the success rates between the industries that you just described and the success they have hiring individuals who've been incarcerated in apprenticeship program and see the benefits or the outcomes of those apprenticeship programs. And I think just an increased awareness of the WOTC for other organizations, continuing the conversation, having these cross collaborative conversations like we're having and leading at the Second Chance Business Coalition, where there are other industry segments at the table asking how the industries you just described, how they're doing it, what their approach is, will really help facilitate learning and systemic change.
Thanks very much. Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And now, Mr. Good of Virginia.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being with us today. My questions will be directed to Ms. Safstrom in just a moment. But first, just to say that Chuck Colson's Prison Fellowship Program and others have estimated that nearly 1 in 3 American adults have a criminal record, some sort of criminal record, which represents some 70 million people. An astounding statistic and equally alarming, the employment rate for these individuals is some 5 times as high as the general population. However, meaningful employment is one of the greatest keys to reducing recidivism. As a Christian, I believe in the principles of and the need for justice, but I also believe in the transformative power of forgiveness and the second chances that we all desire for ourselves and our loved ones, and that our nation's justice system should have a restorative focus along with the necessary punitive component. While I support being tough on crime, and I'm deeply troubled that we are dangerously failing to address the recent surge in violent crime that's skyrocketing across our American cities in the past year, I also strongly support the Trump administration's historic achievements in negotiating and signing into law the First Step Act. So, Ms. Safstrom, as we consider reforming our reentry programs, what were the benefits of and the lessons learned from the Trump administration's First Step Act?
You know, I'm an expert in the work of the Sherm Foundation, certainly, but not necessarily an expert in that particular topic. But I'm happy to confer with my colleagues and get back to the committee.
Well, I think it's clear that the Trump administration was a leader in this area and again made tremendous progress in dealing with many of the issues that we're discussing today with the First Step Act that was passed. And I don't think that that the administration, prior administration, been rightfully been giving that credit to that. So do we have another one of our witnesses who would like to speak about what those successes were and what we can perhaps improve upon from the First Step Act as we try to update our programs? Is another witness that would like to speak to that?
I certainly hope we will expand the amount of funding in the RIO program because we think employment social enterprises can benefit and help people as they come home to get immediate employment. And, you know, I'd like to just quickly comment, you know, I wear a gold star. We lost our son in the Iraq War on 2009. And traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress, as we looked out at what our soldiers and our son faced, we realized that those coming home from prison have had more bullets around them over their head. Our son died by suicide in the Iraqi war theater on June 19, 2009. And we think there's this tremendous opportunity to begin to understand mental health and how the trauma of prison, the trauma that communities that people live in are affecting their brain functioning and the trauma that they have to overcome. So we just feel it's so critically important we help individuals when they come home. And we're very happy because June 19th was a very terrible day for us, but now we're excited it's going to be Juneteenth and a holiday. That just like our clients have to take something awful they've done and transition into something good, That's what we're going to do as a family. We're going to take this tragic death of our son on June 19th in 2009 and turn it into a celebration of moving forward. So thank you for the opportunity to speak about my son and his service to our country.
Mr. Kiesling, thank you for joining into the question there and for offering your response. And we, as a nation, owe a great debt to the service and the sacrifice of your son and so many others. And we mourn with you his tragic passing, and I thank you for sharing that. So on that note, as far as what the topic of the First Step Act, do you have any, and this has been mentioned by some of the other folks today already, but do you have any good metrics to help us in Congress better understand how successful reentry programs may be from the perspective of potential employers, as well as just to assess our investment of resources in, again, reentry programs?
Well, certainly we've had the ETJD that Congress authorized, and that research is out there, and our program had a $1.20 in return on a dollar investment, most of that being that our folks over 30 months earned $6,000 more than the control group. But RTI is doing tremendous research, as are many other the research firms out there. So I think it's really critical that in any reauthorization, we continue to have these random control trials where there's a treatment group and a control group, and the two can be measured against one another.
One final question. So you're saying that those who receive support from programs such as these have on average, a $6,000 per year higher earning than those who are on their own re-entering the workforce after having been incarcerated.
Over 30 months, they made $6,000 more, and they had a significant less violent crime that they participated in.
Okay, thank you, sir. And I yield back my time, Chairman Wilson.
Thank you so much. And now, Ms. Omar of Minnesota.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you so much for convening this important hearing. Formerly incarcerated persons tend to have high rates of unemployment due to social stigma and legal barriers. After serving their sentences, justice-involved individuals are expected to somehow flourish in society that rebukes them for existing. It is clear that we must shift from criminal legal system currently based on retribution and punishment to a criminal justice system that is centered on restoration and rehabilitation. One way in which we can achieve this goal is to form a holistic support system in our workforce development programs for people leaving prison. This means improving access to wraparound services like housing, transportation, and childcare. To ensure that formerly incarcerated individuals have a fair and equitable transition to society, we need to provide them with the sufficient resources to fully engage and succeed in job training and stable employment activities. So my question is to Ms. Littlemore. What has research shown on the importance of providing access to supportive services in improving outcomes for reentry employment programs? And what does it say about mentoring and job coaching and career navigation support for these individuals?
Thank you very much for the question. I think we've recognized for quite some time that wraparound services are necessary, and most of the reentry programs that I have been involved in the evaluation of offer a range of services. Now, not everyone gets everything they need, but at least they've provided a range of services. And I think what we need to know and understand better is what's the proper sequencing of those services. And we talked earlier about cognitive behavior therapy, and one way to think about that is to make sure that people are prepared, sort of mentally and emotionally, to benefit from the next step, from education. But it's just speculation on my part that in some ways it just makes sense, right? I mean, you need to be ready for change, which is what the substance abuse treatment providers talk a lot about. And I think with respect to engagement in education programs and skills development, and again, the transition process, transformation process into a positive self, involves being ready to do that. And we really actually know very little about what programs, in what order, and how much. And that's why there needs to be care taken in the construction of these programs. In my testimony, I talked about a 1 or 2 year grant period is not long enough to put together complicated programs, refine them, and get them to a point where you'd have reasonable expectation that they would be effective. So I think there's a program at Florida State. Some researchers at Florida State University have been working on with support from the Koch Foundation. That's called the 5 Key Reentry Program Model, and it's a wellness-based model that that stresses the importance of well-being, positive relationships, and so forth, and then has as another component a very strong education component to that. So I mean, I think, but that project has been going on now for multiple years, and it's still in the pilot stage. If you think about cancer research, for example, we don't jump immediately to 2 years and we're done with whatever we're doing. And I think this problem is complex, and therefore we need to take time to make sure that we're getting it right.
That certainly is true. And so do you think it would be helpful if a new formula grant was established to assist state workforce systems, especially for improving access to support services?
I definitely think so. I think that, and I think, collaboration across the various federal agencies to assure that that happens, rather than, SAMHSA in their silo and Ed in their silo and so forth, but to really have a very focused and well-coordinated interagency coordination around these issues, I think would go a long way to expediting the identification of really successful models.
Thank you for your thoughtful response to my question and for your work, Chairwoman. I yield back.
Now we'll hear from Ms. McLean of Michigan, Representative McLean.
Thank you. Dr. Lattimore, similar to how some individuals are able to obtain their GED and some forms of education while they're incarcerated, how do skilled trade programs find job prospects in those re-entering society, and are they able to reach them in advance to their re-entry?
Yes, thank you for the question, and I will let some of my colleagues on the panel address the how employers go about actually connecting. But I will stress that my research has shown, or the research that we've done has shown, that individuals are really anxious to engage in programming while they're incarcerated, and then when they get out, it's such a struggle to basically live that they get disconnected. And one problem with prison-based programs, of course, is the prison may be several hundred miles away from their home community, and so making those connections with where someone's going to live and where they're currently incarcerated can be very difficult. So I think programs that was mentioned earlier, a program where people are moved closer to home before release, Florida has done that also, for example, is important. And then that in-reach to try to make that linkage, if it's not with employers, which I think probably would be the best, but with at least the employment services agencies, right, that are trying to support these individuals is just critical. I have despaired in my, at the results of my research to see how little programming and services individuals actually get once they're released. It's very, well, for me personally, it's just been kind of disheartening. It's like, you're talking about a program that's focused on reentry, and then it's just so difficult because of individuals struggling with living to keep them engaged in services post-release.
So if I hear you correctly, it's not that they're not getting the training while incarcerated. There are programs and they are getting trained. It's when they get out, there's a lack of willingness to employ them. So the programs are there, skilled trades programs during the incarceration.
There are some, and it's highly variable. And I think the other issue, and again, I'm sure that Tracy or Wendy or Greg could respond to this from their own experience with their organizations. But the issue is matching the training to the available job opportunities in the community that individuals are going to return to. And so many of our the quality of in-prison programs is highly variable, and I think people can come away with some basic skills. I like to think about it from the standpoint that individuals can start their training while they're incarcerated, start their education processes while they're incarcerated, with an expectation, as is true for all of us, that lifetime learning is really something we all need to do now. And so to facilitate that is really important. I want to make one other point related to some of the things that we've talked about the difficulties faced by individuals when they're being released, by mentioning something I'm acutely aware of, which is that many of these individuals, in addition to facing challenges with respect to housing and transportation and so forth, come out of prisons or go on probation with owing considerable court fees, fines, and the fees and fines that they're charged. In some places you have to pay $60 a month as someone who's on probation. And $60 doesn't sound like a whole lot to us, but for someone who's struggling to find employment, to find housing and so forth, it's just yet one more barrier that individuals face.
So if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is even with a skilled trade, that's not addressing the issue. We need to address the other issues before we address the skilled trades issues.
Well, I mean, I think that we need to address, we need to make sure, and just because there's some education provided in prison does not necessarily mean that that education is actually preparing someone to enter a skilled trade. And there certainly needs to be much more connection on that point, that we need to make sure that the skills that are being taught are actually skills that are marketable in the community. And we've talked about stacked credentials, and we talked about career advancement. So I think that you need to set people need to be set on that path. But in addition to that, the discussions about wraparound services and making sure that the services are properly sequenced so that people are ready for treatment. I think we need to learn a lot more about that. And rather than it being piecemeal. And again, just to come back to the point that that takes time. It takes more than a 2-year grant program to figure out.
It takes time and it takes money, right?
And it takes money. Yeah, that's right. That's right too.
Okay, thank you.
Any job, better job career.
Yeah, if I could add one very quick point. The top 3 apprenticeship programs in prison are in maid housekeeping and in cooks and institution and animal trainers. Not all of those jobs are amenable to all markets, but if you look at apprenticeships post-release, you look at the top placements for apprenticeships are on electricians, construction, and plumbers. So while there are programs that are pre-release, they're not connecting to what the market
right. There isn't a match. There isn't a match there. Okay, thank you.
We have to adhere to the time. We have so many members who have not spoken, and these same questions are going to be asked. So please adhere. Let's respect each other's time. Mr. Bowman, our Vice Chair of the entire committee of New York.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Ms. Scott, thank you for your testimony before the committee and the work you do to support justice-involved individuals. I represent New York's 16th District, which includes parts of Westchester County and the Bronx, where I was a principal. So I'd like to start off with a question about the people you serve before they come to you and before they were incarcerated. Having worked directly with students for the greater part of my career, I know that students need counselors, not cops. When there's an increase in law enforcement present, there is also an increase in interactions with law enforcement. And those interactions, unfortunately, are disproportionately negative, harmful, and potentially deadly for Black and Brown students. If you had to estimate how many individuals in the National Urban League's Reentry Jobs Program first got involved in the justice system while they were a student in school, how would you estimate that?
Thank you for this question, Representative Bowman. That number I am not prepared research to do. What I will add are that those urban communities that are under-resourced do have an outsized ratio between guidance counselors and students. It's double that what it should be, and it's even worse in urban communities. So youth who are engaged and are looking for an opportunity do not have an assigned professional to help lead them into an opportunity. The second bit, and I'm very grateful that you bring up the Bronx and some of the more struggling communities that are in New York City, is that we don't talk about gang involvement, labor trafficking, and sex trafficking, and that these contribute to high school dropout rates and usually precipitate the first engagement that young people have with law enforcement. And that shapes how they see their community, how they engage, and their value that they do have in their community. What the National Urban League and its affiliates do, and that's where we engage with having out of school time programs that are available. We support summer youth employment activities that contribute to not only job skill development, but also needed income in poverty-stricken communities so that it helps individuals and families.
Thank you. I also wanted to ask, the school to prison pipeline disproportionately impacts Black and Brown students, and it is particularly damaging for students of color with special needs. What supports have you found to be especially important in helping individuals find employment when they may have special needs that have been unsupported for quite some time?
I'm so very glad. That seems like it might be left field, but it's something we don't talk about. First, when we do talk about individuals who may have learning disability or cognitive diversity in the low income communities such as Hispanic or Latinx and African American communities, many go undetected because there are no programs they cannot afford a simple assessment. So those individuals, those young people go through school having a learning disability, having different needs that go unmet. If an individual or a young adult decides to take their high school equivalency or GED, if they are diagnosed with having a learning disability, they get extra provisions to complete the test. But if they do not have that designation, they do not have that authority to complete their GED. So the first bit is on assessment. The second bit is on funding those programs so that those individuals who are not financially in a place to privately pay for those services, that is available to them. And that also is one of the contributing factors to a young person engaging in unhelpful, antisocial behavior in their communities.
Mm-hmm. I don't have much time. I just had a quick general question. We could start with Ms. Scott and go all the way around. How much of your work is driven by ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and the research related to ACEs? Just a quick go around starting with Ms. Scott.
Yep. So all of our programs are case management based, and it all centers on an assessment that actually includes information for ACEs.
I would say 100% of those we serve have been impacted by adverse childhood experiences, and like the trauma that our son went through with his traumatic brain injury. These are big things that we've got to address.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with that. I think it would involve almost everyone who goes through certainly who goes through our prisons. And back to your question about youth, I will point out that most of the prison studies that I've done, the average age at first arrest is somewhere between 15 and 16. So, so that's pretty young.
Mental health and wellness in the workplace on behalf of Chief Human Resources officers for the entirety of the population has become, as you can imagine, increasingly important. And in fact, we're holding a workplace mental health wellness summit in October. And we've invited, I believe it's Dr. Nadine Harris, who will be coming to speak to us about that program.
Thank you so much, Madam Chairwoman. I yield back.
Now, Representative Harsh Barger from Tennessee.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Ranking Member Murphy, and thank you witnesses for being here. This is very enlightening. It's extremely important that we talk about this topic, and I appreciate your work in these areas. Mr. Kiesling, I'm so sorry about the loss of your son, and I thank you for his service, absolutely. Ms. Lattimore, just as a side note, I'd love to have more information on, as a pharmacist, I would love to have more information on traumatic brain injuries in the incarcerated public. If you could do that for me.
Yes, happy to.
Thank you. You know, while we discuss the importance of developing policies that allow justice-involved individuals to re-enter the workforce, it's important that we don't support policies that keep them from returning to work. And occupational licensing is a big impediment for getting Americans to work, and this is an especially large burden for justice-involved individuals. I do have a bill that's called the Freedom to Work Act that encourages adoption of less burdensome occupational licensing barriers. And my question goes to Ms. Safstrom. You represent human resource leaders, and can you speak to your comfortability with reducing occupational licensing barriers that may prevent these justice-involved individuals from coming back to work?
Thank you for that question. I unfortunately can't comment specifically as to those barriers, but certainly that is something that I can take back to my colleagues on the SHRM side and bring forward to the committee.
Well, that would be fantastic because there's definitely room to roll back these unnecessary occupational licensing burdens, and it could really get more Americans back to work, including those who've been involved in the criminal justice system. And let me tell you a little bit about what that bill does. It really directs the federal government to identify and eliminate its policies that encourage the adoption of really unnecessary occupational licensing barriers at the state level. And it requires those states to list their plan to reduce those occupational licensing barriers to their WIOA state plans. So we should not pass WIOA reauthorization legislation without including occupational licensing reform, period. I do not believe this should be a partisan issue. You know, both the Trump administration and the Obama administration recognized that these occupational licensing, it was a barrier to employment. And I encourage everyone, my Democratic colleagues, to join me in you know, on this important initiative. And what I would like to do is reference a 2019 report by the Arkansas Center for Research and Economics. And it states that, that states with the heaviest occupational licensing burdens have a 12.15% increase in recidivism above the national average, while states with the lowest occupational licensing burdens have a 2.59% decrease in recidivism. And if it's okay, without objection, I ask that this report be entered into the hearing record, Madam Chair.
So ordered.
Okay. And really what I want to do is just thank the witnesses for joining this important discussion, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Mhm.
Now, Mr. McClure of Wisconsin. Mr.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thanks for making this issue become such a great bipartisan issue of support. Appreciate your leadership on that. I served in the Wisconsin legislature prior to coming to Congress. I was the ranking Dem on the Corrections Committee, and actually at the time the chairman was Scott Walker before he became governor. So worked on these issues for a long time. One of the things we did a little after that period when we had Jim Doyle became governor was, for the first time ever, we had the Secretaries of Corrections, Human Services, and Workforce Development sitting down together. And so prior to that, as you mentioned, some people just get a bus pass and whatever money they had, and they have to figure out everything else. We kind of made sure that people had, if you had mental health issues, you had your medications, that we made sure people had an ID, because something as simple as getting that ID for opening the bank account and everything else really mattered. So I guess I'm trying to get an idea, how wide of a variety of different experiences do people have state to state on that very first step of transitioning out, what they're actually getting from the respective states that they may have been housed in? And I know Ms. Scott and Ms. Lattimore, you both talked about this a little bit. So if you both wouldn't mind addressing it.
Thank you for that question, Representative Pocan. It's a very large question, and so one I'm not prepared to give, but it's something that we can. We have 91 affiliates, and so we have quite a robust response that we can provide to you.
Great, thank you.
And I will say, I've probably conducted research related to prisoner reentry in at least 25 states over the course of my career. And I can say, I mean, I agree with Ms. Scott, it's a very complicated question, but there's huge variability. You know, I mean, even something so simple as some states have halfway houses and other states don't. Right. Some states have work release and other states don't, you know, so even on these big major components of what a lot of people would think are normal, you see huge variation. And, you know, I commend Wisconsin for beginning to tackle this problem. I think that's really important, because a bus ticket really doesn't carry people very far. And so I think that's really good. I mean, we can get more details on the variability across states, but I will just tell you that it's huge.
And Congressman, here in Indiana, we actually had a meeting with our state legislature, and we used Wisconsin as a model that we hope we could do more of. So thank you.
Well, and I guess, you know, to the three of you who answered the question, I mean, should we have some minimal standards, right? Because prior to that, we didn't, right? We had that bus ticket and that was it. And clearly that puts people at such a disadvantage to that very first step out to be able to do things. You know, as we're looking at this, is there anything that, you know, you might recommend in this area?
Yeah, yes, I would. One is access, a universal access, meaning statewide access for non-for-profits to have access to inmates pre-release. That is just key to be able to share what resources are available in the community and create a plan, a post-release plan.
I will just add that, you know, that a requirement should probably come with some indication of funding streams, right? Because, you know, about most of the cost of corrections is borne by state and local governments, not the federal government. And in fact, I think about I don't know, somewhere above 90% of the correction cost in this country, or that 80, actually the last number that I'd seen was on the order of almost $90 billion a year in corrections. Almost all of that is borne by state and local governments. And so I think figuring out how to finance something that really is urgent. And I do believe that you would see cost savings if when that's done. I suspect Wisconsin has in terms of returns to prison, but you know, there are the upfront costs for that.
Yeah, we were, I'm sorry, go ahead, Greg.
Well, I will add just the employment social enterprise movement is growing. We're not even the only one here in Indiana, and as we're beginning to grow. So having that funding that allows us to capture this person immediately upon release from prison, and we can see them prior to release and build these pathways. And then they move into the alternative staffing where employers can really begin to see these folks and get a chance to hire them.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll yield back.
Ms. Sparks of Indiana.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Kislin, for being here today and what you're doing in the great state of Indiana. I know we have a lot of discussions, wraparound services, and talking about all these different initiatives that needs to be done in more wholesome and comprehensive basis, not ad hoc and fragmented, but government is generally fragmented. You know, and that just always a challenge. And in the Indiana legislature, when I was state senator, we had a discussion, do we really need to rethink our criminal justice system in general? Because it's just, you know, we have a different issues we're dealing with, and a lot of us, you know, people dealing with mental health issues, addiction issues, and everything else. So I appreciate what you do, but I have a question for you. We talk about lifelong learning opportunities because we want people to be able to have second chances. And I think, you know, it's very important to do that. What do you believe
Are there mechanisms that you believe exist for people to do this lifelong learning, or what is the obstacles you see mostly why people go back in criminal justice system and don't stay, as a successful member of society?
Well, I think the most important thing that people do is to have a job. And so when you have a lot of barriers, with your educational levels and things like that, we need to address them. But there are a lot of jobs, as you well know, all through central Indiana here. And it's just beginning to work with employers to be more open. And, with our state's electronic monitoring and some of the, the heavy-handed oversight that happens, it's very difficult to work continuously with this monitoring. If you get ordered to a random drug test, you have to go to your employer and ask for the day off. People are left often when they're under oversight of choosing between keeping my job and being violated or quitting my job and trying to adhere to the criminal justice oversight. So I really feel we've made some really good progress in Marion County of how we've been able to keep the violations down. Historically in Indianapolis, I'm doing this work. In the past, 7 out of 10 people who went back to prison each year didn't commit a new crime. They had a technical rule violation of their mandates when they re-entered. Today, we've been able in Marion County to reduce that down to 50%. Still a long way to go, but in the other counties, it's growing dramatically. And we're starting to see a pretty significant shift of people from other counties into Indianapolis because there are more jobs, there's more services, and that's a burden to the resources that we have available here. So we'd really like to see the counties work much closer with criminal justice oversight. You probably know Greg Stewart-Wald and the 1006 legislation that really hasn't had a chance to fully do what it can do. And so we would just like to see that expansion. And thank you, Congresswoman, for giving me these opportunities from Indiana to talk to you today.
Well, thank you very much. And Dr. Lattimore, a quick question for you. If you kind of looking at different types of programs and, and we did some evidence-based programs. I work very closely with, with some of the retired judges and former prosecutors. What have you seen with some of these evidence-based programs? What is really work? What is very important to be successful, to let people have the second chances? And what is the biggest obstacles you've seen?
Thank you for the question. I think we've touched on much of it today, and I repeat what Mr. Kiesling said, that people need jobs, they need work, and they need the programming that will help them be able to get the credentials, to be able to have an opportunity for a career. I think that basically pointing a path for individuals so that they see that there's that there is a light down at the end of this road that is going to be positive and productive for them. I believe those are the kinds of things, and these are exactly the kind of programs that the WIOA is focused on promoting. And so, I mean, I think that that is one piece of it. I also appreciated Mr. Kiesling's discussion about technical violations. I have another project that's looking at community supervision and changes and reform to community supervision across the United States, what states are doing to try to improve that. Technical violations are a source of that, and the length of time that people are on supervision, those two things combined to generate a large number of individuals going back to prison. So I think we need to be thankful or thoughtful about the conditions that are actually imposed and make sure that they don't do more harm than good.
Thank you. I actually looking at supervised release at the federal level. So thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And now we'll hear from our distinguished Chairman Scott of Virginia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to thank all of our witnesses for their testimony. And first wanted to add to the list that the gentleman from Wisconsin mentioned about the unnecessary bureaucratic barriers. One is trying to reinstate your Medicaid coverage that you gets cut off. When you get out, you have to sign up. There's a waiting period. And if you've got a chronic disease or something like that, it's just an unnecessary barrier. If you can keep your Medicaid active, you don't need it while you're in prison, so you're not filing any medical charges. But that's just another barrier. There's legislation that I've introduced to try to fix that. To Ms. Scott, if the Urban League works as a vendor for apprenticeships and reentry, can you talk a little bit about the intersection between reentry and apprenticeships on pre-entry, pre-release programs, and also whether or not there would be a problem if there is additional funding for the Urban League to scale up to be able to serve more people?
Thank you so very much, Representative Scott, for that question. Great last name, by the way. When we do talk about apprenticeship and reentry, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, that we do see racial participation in apprenticeships differ for those who are currently incarcerated into apprenticeship program. For those that do participate, I believe the exit rate for apprenticeship among African Americans, I believe, is $17 an hour compared to their white counterparts, and that's $26 an hour. And a considerable reason for that is because of reentry of those who are currently incarcerated enroll in an apprenticeship program at an entering rate, a salary wage rate at 47%, $47. And then when they exit, it's at $1.47. Individuals who are in pre-apprenticeships, in apprenticeships that are not incarcerated make considerably more, $36 an hour. So that's the first thing we need to talk about is the racial wage gap in apprenticeships. The other bit, what is helpful when working with national intermediaries, are that apprenticeships are not just in one space, they are national. And there are many trade unions, trade associations and unions that are national, and working with having partnerships with the National Urban League allows us to connect to individuals, to introduce them into an apprenticeship opportunity. The National Urban League runs its own pre-apprenticeship program that actually prepares individuals to qualify for apprenticeship, and that's a barrier itself. So it mentioned driver's license, that can be a problem. Obtaining a high school diploma, that can also be a challenge too. And so working with national intermediaries, we're able to do that, be able to scale up. It's very easy for us to pop up in any one of our 36 states where the National Urban League is, and ensure that there's a stronger connection to apprenticeships and stronger readiness for it.
Thank you. Mr. Kesling, a question came up earlier about legal liability. Is a bonding authority available to businesses that want to protect themselves?
There is the federal bond, but it's very limited. One of the things that we've done here in Indiana, we have passed negligent hire legislation. However, the insurance companies are not based in Indiana, and so insurance companies really drive the liability, and it just wrong.
That sounds like something we need to fix.
Oh, thank you. You
Okay.
definitely need to fix that.
Let me ask you another question. We've talked a lot about prison programs. Are there any programs for jails?
We're operating one now out of the Marion County Jail.
Okay, and Ms. Lattimore, you mentioned the Florida State program, the Koch brothers. Can you say a word about the need for training in soft skills as well as the technical training, and whether or not there's a place for funding for the soft skills training?
There definitely is, and we've talked today about wraparound services, which of course would include soft skills training. If you've never interviewed for a job, you don't know how to interview for a job often, and so it's really important that that people are exposed to that, and that can be done through a program. It can also be done through mentorship programs that provide support for individuals. The program that's being run out of Florida State is an example of a program that is taking several years to develop to try to make sure that it's getting the sequencing of supports correct. And so I think that, there are examples out there, and there are jail-based programs all over the country, just to go back to your previous question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Now for our distinguished ranking member, Ms. Scott, Ms. Fox.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. And I thank all our witnesses for being here and giving us a lot of useful information today. Ms. Safstrom, while it's not a provision of WIOA, I appreciated that you mentioned the value of the work opportunity tax credit in your testimony. If we want to effectively use taxpayer funds, we must ensure that we're taking into account existing programs and benefits. This includes not just this tax credit, but also other programs intended to support re-entering citizens like Second Chance Pell or those programs operated under the Second Chance Act. Is there a particular area we can focus on as we work to reauthorize WIOA that would allow that law to build upon the successes of re-entry efforts rather than duplicating what is already being done?
I think it's going to take a really intentional look at how responsibility is divided amongst the different programs that are existing. WIOA, the Second Chance Act, Second Chance, the Pell Act. It's really taking coordinated effort and understanding what areas of responsibilities, again, fall under those particular types of grants or employment funding opportunities.
Yeah, it's an example of having too many silos again. It's something we've worked on for a long time, trying to get rid of silos that create problems where you go searching for specific categories to find the funding. And that has been a real problem in all federal government programs. We don't need all those different programs. We really do need to consolidate in one area. Mr. Kiesling, thank you for the work you do to help all individuals, in particular those exiting the criminal justice system, have access to transformative power of the dignity of meaningful work. We've talked about this in this committee a lot, about work being a way out of a lot of problem issues, drug addiction and all kinds of things. Programs like Recycle Force and your Any Job, Better Job career model demonstrate what's possible if we empower local community leaders in this space. As we contemplate reauthorization of WIOA and how to support reentry efforts, why is it important to allow for local flexibility and innovation rather than simply increasing funding and handing the reins to the Department of Labor?
Well, certainly the Department of Labor has been flexible with us, but I think each region has its own labor, the type of jobs and the type of credentialing and preparing people for the labor force we need to have. So there's no one size fit all. Here in the Silicon Valley of logistics, it's a lot different than what might be happening in San Francisco. So I think that we need that flexibility, and I'm very happy that the RIO program has provided us that flexibility. We've been working now with them over 10 years. And I can't tell you, how fun it has been to watch some of the people transition out and retire. The new blood that's come on at RIO now that is really, really innovative and good thinking. We work out of the Chicago regional offices, and our FPOs up there have been just phenomenal over all of our grants. So there's a lot of flexibility, but you're correct that sometimes a rule that might sound good in one part of the country often could be, difficult for us in another part of the country. And so where we can build bridges between or connections between these silos so we can begin to work across the various issues that we face would be very, very helpful to us.
Well, thank you very much. And again, I want to thank all the witnesses for being here today. And Madam Chairwoman, I'm going to yield back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And now, Mr. Castro of Texas.
Thank you, Chairwoman. COVID-19 has shed a light into how critical a role the workforce system plays in our communities, as we've been discussing today. And this is especially true for justice-involved individuals who face great challenges in re-entering the workforce system. In my own district of San Antonio, our workforce system works with a number of community partners to fund free finish recidivism through education, employment, and divinity, Texas. Free Texas helps those in our criminal justice system have access to employment and education advisors, life coaches, and frontline advocates who have firsthand experience with the justice system and who can connect these folks to employers. It's a rigorous program, but it sets them up for success. So I have a few questions.
Ms. Safstrom, as my community has shown, local workforce development boards play a large role in connecting justice-involved individuals to job opportunities. How have employers who are interested in hiring these folks worked with the workforce development boards to recruit justice-involved individuals and support their education? And what recommendations do you have for how the public workforce development system could be a more effective partner in promoting employment for these folks?
I think there are instances where employers can do a much better proactive job of reaching out to the workforce investment boards and asking to become active members of said board so that they can advise as to the types of industry sectors, the types of jobs, not only, again, as I mentioned before, but not only for today, where they see things going for the future. And I think that in some instances, employers have been very involved. In other instances, not as much as they could or would like to. And I think that's part of the education process that we have on our plate in terms of connecting with our membership. We have over 300,000 members. The majority of them are here in the United States, and it's connecting with them and reinforcing the importance of those workforce boards, how those dollars are invested and how decisions are made so that we can contribute to those informed decisions.
Thank you. That was my only question. I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And now, Ms. Bonamici.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chair Wilson and Ranking Member Murphy, and thank you to the witnesses for your testimony. We know workforce programs and registered apprenticeships are often life-changing opportunities. And in Northwest Oregon, and the district I'm honored to represent, one of our regional pre-apprenticeship programs is called Constructing Hope. They provide formerly incarcerated individuals with career pathways and support access to good paying jobs in the trades. I have a community partnership like with this one with IBEW Local 48. Constructing Hope helps place workers who have faced barriers to employment, help them into high quality, good paying jobs. And I've spoken with some of these pre-apprentices. A woman named Sarah is a single mom. And she said without Constructing Hope's pre-apprenticeship programs, she said to me, I would never be here providing a better life for my kids and myself. And stories like Sarah's demonstrate that the very aptly named Constructing Hope program does much more than help with job skills. Their Building Equity program also addresses some of the disparities that formerly incarcerated individuals face in securing housing, financial assistance, obtaining a driver's license, and more. So the work at Constructing Hope is only one example of how more support for reentry programs in our upcoming WIOA reauthorization can help make sure that more justice-involved individuals have access to good paying jobs. So Ms. Scott, what strategies has the Urban League found to be most effective in helping justice-involved individuals access good paying jobs, and how can expanding the connection between reentry and registered apprenticeships help? Thank you so very much, Representative Bonamici, for that question. What's important is for us to look at the entire workforce ecosystem or for jobs that are available. Oftentimes, when we think of reentry, we think of construction jobs, and those jobs are fabulous. But there are other opportunities and other industries that are available. For example, we have a training program that is in Louisiana, and working with a reentry individual that served, I believe, 20 years in federal prison. Currently, he serves in the human services industry as a counselor, housing counselor for homeless reentry individuals, making $20 an hour. We have another individual in Chicago who is serving 2 years in federal prison for trafficking. Currently, he is a forklifter working in warehouse industry. So when you have individuals who have strong national and local partnerships, you can then introduce individuals to different career pathways and uncover employers that are friendly, that are willing to give a second chance to someone who wants to reintegrate and to serve their community. Terrific. That's really helpful. And Mr. Kiesling, I appreciate that your testimony highlights the importance of wraparound services like mentorship, housing, mental health counseling, childcare. How does Recycle Force connect these support services to your employment and training program? And how have these services helped justice-involved individuals access and thrive in stable and long-term employment opportunities?
As an employment social enterprise, we can embed them. It's just part of our services that we provide. So they're on site. We have mental health counselors on site. We have the credentialing work on site. And so we're able to get to it. We can always use more money. We're constantly looking for more partnerships and how we develop. I talked earlier about the fake drugs that are just sweeping. We know how to provide treatment for heroin and cocaine, but we don't know how to provide treatment for these fake drugs that are being knocked off. And then I really want to just you talked about your concept up there with the union. We've been able to really, in our public works here, dramatically open opportunities. And we see it as a tremendous opportunity as infrastructure. We hope you will pass that and bring there, as we can engage the people that we're serving in the rebuilding of our country. And we've got a model here in Indianapolis. The ASME union and the leadership here has just done a phenomenal job. They've hired 41 to date into the union. We learned this past week, there's 40 more positions that the folks in the B portion of our model that are now working for the public works in alternative staffing will have a chance to interview for. So we know we're going to go up. We hope we get all 40. We'll see how good our guys and girls do. But we are very excited about these opportunities. And we think this model, as we work with Secretary Buttigieg, another fellow Hoosier,
Sure. Right.
as we begin to talk about infrastructure of how we can work with the unions in the Department of Transportation with this model. Any job, with the social enterprise, the better job with the staffing arm, and then the career when the union hires them.
Thank you so much. Yeah, those support services really matter. And yes, we're very excited about the potential that with the infrastructure package that is moving out of the committee and hopefully to the floor and get that over the finish line. There's be a lot of jobs and we want to make sure that people have the skills to do them. So thanks for doing your part. I yield back. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Bottomley. I remind my colleagues that pursuant to committee practice, materials for submission for the hearing record must be submitted to the committee clerk within 14 days following the last day of the hearing. So by close of business on June 29, 2021, preferably in Microsoft Word format. The material submitted must address the subject matter of the hearing. Only a member of the subcommittee or an invited witness may submit materials for inclusion in the hearing record. Documents are limited to 50 pages each. Documents longer than 50 pages will be incorporated into the record by way of an internet link that you must provide to the committee clerk within the qualified time frame. But please recognize that in the future, the link may no longer work. Pursuant to House rules and regulations, items for the record should be submitted to the clerk electronically by emailing submission to edandlabor.hearings@mail.house.gov. Again, I want to thank our amazing witnesses for their participation and their riveting information that they shared today. Members of the subcommittee may have additional questions for you, and we ask the witnesses to please respond to those questions in writing. The hearing record may be held open for 14 days in order to receive those responses. I remind my colleagues that pursuant to committee practice, witnesses' questions for the hearing record must be submitted to the majority committee staff or committee clerk within 7 days. Questions submitted must address the subject matter of the hearing. I now recognize the distinguished ranking member, Dr. Murphy, for a closing statement.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I share your comments about this was an excellent meeting by our committee members and our witnesses. I think it just shows that we have very fertile ground on which to work to help improve the issue at hand. So I want to tell you, this is something I think that's an important issue. And as I spoke to earlier, I think prevention is worth a pound of cure with this. That said, I think there's some very, very good points that people brought out on how we're going to hopefully take care of those who are in prison and give them a chance for a life outside of prison and one where they're a productive member of society. So I mentioned in my questioning that we need to do more about prevention by addressing root causes and the drivers of criminal behavior. However, as I said, we must ensure that second chances are given to ex-offenders. That is what our nation does. I'm encouraged by the bipartisan attitude of the committee. I'm encouraged by the bipartisan spirit and passage of the First Step Act shortly before I entered Congress. I'm hopeful that we will be able to continue on that progress and on that path towards reauthorization of WIOA. These past reentry programs have demonstrated somewhat mixed results. We have a chance to learn from their work to improve implementation, innovation, and opportunity. Those re-entering society and returning to the workforce deserve programs that are held accountable with high performance and positive outcomes. Funding alone cannot solve this problem. WIOA must build upon what works, avoid duplicating existing work, and enable new innovation and experimentation. Successful reentry has the opportunity to expand the talent pool for employers so that businesses can be competitive in the 21st century economy. And I'm hopeful that today's conversation will move us closer and closer to that goal. Thank you again, witnesses, and thank you again, committee members, and thank you, Madam Chairman. I will yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. I now recognize myself for the purpose of making my closing statement. I want to thank the witnesses again for taking the time to be with us for our third and final hearing on reauthorizing WIOA. Today's hearing shed a helpful light on the challenges that justice-involved individuals face to finding employment and building a new life. As we heard from our witnesses, these barriers to employment often determine whether justice-involved individuals successfully return to their communities or return to prison. However, we also established that we can help break this cycle of incarceration by including reentry programs in our reauthorization and establishing a stable source of funding for opportunities to help justice-impacted individuals succeed. For example, we can ensure that all reentry programs offer comprehensive supportive services, including mentorship and behavioral health treatment, and that justice-impacted individuals need to prevent recidivism. And we can invest in subsidized employment and vocational training that will help those individuals build skills towards rewarding careers and help employers overcome the stigma surrounding justice-impacted workers. I look forward to drawing on the valuable testimony that we received today from our witnesses. You were outstanding. And throughout our series of hearings, as we consider the next steps towards comprehensively reauthorizing WIOA, codifying evidence-based reentry practices are among the key priorities we plan to include in this reauthorization, along with addressing worker displacement, supporting lifelong learning, and expanding work-based learning opportunities for our nation's youth. These critical steps will help ensure that all of our nation's workers have access to the skills and training they need to stay competitive in our rapidly changing economy. Finally, I want to thank Ranking Member Fox, her staff, and Ranking Member Murphy for engaging in this bipartisan process. Our series of bipartisan hearings provided each member with the opportunity to engage in open and frank discussions about how we can improve WIOA. I hope our conversations will provide a strong foundation for our work ahead. If there is no further business, without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.
Thank you, Chair Wilson and Ranking Member Murphy, very much. Thank you.
Thank you all. Safe travels.
Yes, thank you.
You should just go to your living room. I don't know.